So their first impression of you is going to be really important. And you know, you can't retake a first impression, right? So what they want to do is interviews develop an impression of how you look, you dress, you know, how you act, and also to provide their feedback to admissions committees. Each admissions committee runs very differently. And so some interviews are associated with admissions committees, some are not. College of Medicine Tucson, basically any interviews that happen with MMI, they are not part of the admissions committee. The admissions committee is a different entity. Information gets funneled to that admissions committee, but each school is going to run it a little differently. So any information you can find out is very helpful, but definitely Tucson and Phoenix, the interviewers are not part of that committee. So you can't assume that they're going to make those judgments. Probably the biggest thing is being prepared, right? Because this is it, right? If you did everything looks good, and then you mess up the interview, you know, that's really disappointing, right? You've done all that work. So you want to put in as much work as you did probably with your application. So the preparation and also reflecting, right? Because if you applied to 20 schools and you got 18 secondaries and you got 3 interviews, each school is going to look for something as far as, are you a good fit for that school? So being reflective and also evaluating, this is what they're going to look for. So when you're preparing, just keep in mind your skills and qualifications at med schools. And again, I want to really put a little disclaimer. It could be any health profession. It just happens that a lot of students who are applying are in medicine. But if you're going to veterinary school and applying there, or PT school, all those health profession programs are trying to get a sense of who you are as they start to go through these different applicants. So the preparation, you want to prepare and really kind of describe to and state your value as a candidate. What makes you uniquely different? And I think, you know, this process can be so grueling, right? It's so competitive that you might even think in the back of your mind, hey, I'm just like every other applicant. Hopefully when
Josie,
you start, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you meaning to share your screen?
Oh, so sorry, my bad. Thank you. Oops. Did that work? Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Please feel free to keep reminding me. So when you're preparing for the interviews, you know, why do you want to become a physician or a vet or a physical therapist? You know, you've done that through your personal statement. You've done a lot of reflecting. This process, when you get to the interview, you've already come up with the ideas of why you want to be in that health profession. And again, I'll use physician as an example. You know, what are your abilities and how have you prepared, right? In that personal statement, you talked about how academically, personally, and also professionally have you prepared, and why do you want to go into this profession? Part of it is also practicing your accomplishments and experiences and education, the skills and career goals. Each one of you have had a separate pathway and preparation. And, you know, you could have had 12 different people doing the same, you know, clinical experience, but what you walk away with, what you learned, what was a takeaway message from that experience is going to come out during that interview. So definitely you want to practice and review, you know, your written application, your secondary application, your personal statement, know it well, be comfortable about talking about it, and then, you know, incorporate those experiences in your answers. So it isn't just answering the question, but also, like if they ask you, so why do you want to be a doctor? That one should always be a question you're ready to be prepared. I give you an example because part being of the MMI, I've done MMI interviews and I've gotten that question to tell us, you know, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a physical therapist? And this is a time for you to shine. And I was really amazed by the number of applicants who really didn't verbally express why they wanted to do this. And they ran out, they either didn't have enough to say, and a lot of times it was they didn't have enough to say. And in MMIs, you have about 7 minutes to do that. So you should think about, why is it that I want to go into that health profession? And if you had to tell somebody that, and you had to do it like an elevator speech, like 5 or 6 minutes, what would you say? You know, because again, this is a time for you to, you know, express yourself. The other thing, here's a link. And if you haven't, hopefully you have already, is to refer back to the AAMC core competencies and this link right here. And we will share this link with the students and also the PowerPoint. But basically, when you're looking at this, it talks about the core competencies and attributes of what they're looking for in a applicant. And here they are, kind of in a nutshell. The ones that aren't listed here are already taken for, you kind of take them for granted. There's the science and intellectual abilities, which are gained through the MCAT and your grades. So these are the core competencies of, service orientation, why you want to work with people, social skills, how you demonstrate that, your cultural competency. You're going into health professions and you're going to be dealing with people who are not like you. So how do you deal with that? Maybe you did a study abroad and you talk about that in your personal statement. And, what skills or traits did you gain from that experience? What did you learn that's going to help you as a healthcare professional? Teamwork, right? You're not running in isolation. You're working as a team. And definitely that's a question that will always come up is, how do you work as a team? And then oral communication. How do you communicate written and verbally and orally? Ethical responsibility, reliability and dependability, resiliency, and capacity for improvement. When you're going to an interview, they're trying to get at any one of these traits or multiple traits. So when you answer a question and they say, why do you want to be a physician? Some of the things that come to mind is, your service orientation, you work with the population, maybe you were working in a border health clinic, your social skills, how do you interact with people, the teamwork. So whenever you're going to an interview, they're really looking to come up with these answers. And you have to come up with, how did it fit in? What is your personal experience? Just like the personal statement is a personal statement, that your interview is about you. And you want to let that interviewer know anything about you that will help them make a decision if you're selected or not. So here are the types of interviews. And we're going to go through them all in the mock interviews at the very second part of the presentation. But you have your traditional interviews, and those are like the one-on-ones. Years ago when they didn't do MMIs, they were traditional ones. You might have been set up with 3 different interviews. You might have had maybe 30 to 45 minutes to talk to an interviewer. And a lot of the discussion when they started going into MMIs was that, you could have a horrible experience with one of the interviewers and you don't get in. Right? So there was a lot of weight put on 3 different interviews. It could be with a medical student, it could be with staff, it could be with faculty, but that was a traditional type of interview. So you made an appointment, you went in there, you talked to them. And in the traditional interviews also, there are 2 types. So you have your open interviews, which they have access to all your information. So on that traditional interview, if you went in, let's say, an interview with Dr. Cohen, and she's going to ask you questions, but she has your AMCAS application in front of her, and she also has your personal statement and transcripts. That's an open interview. That means they have access and they could ask you questions based upon that, right? Or a closed interview. And College of Medicine Tucson and Phoenix, they're closed. So the interviewers do not have any information about you. And so you're going in there cold turkey, so you can't refer to your application, say, on my application, da, 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 da. They don't know because it's not in front of them. They're really trying to get a sense of who you are and how do you meet those core competencies. And then the next one is a panel interview. So typically in panel interviews, and a lot of like physical therapy, I think AT still does this, and they do, they'll have maybe 2 or 3 different people, faculty, other interviewers, and they'll be interviewing maybe 2 or 3 students at the same time. So those are panel interviews. Or they might have 1 faculty and they're interviewing 3 different students or applicants. And so that one is a panel interview. Then you go into your hybrids. University of Michigan does this. They do like a small mini MMI, which is like maybe 3 or 4 stations. And then they'll do individual traditional interviews also. So know where you're going and what they're doing as far as their interviews. And then of course the new one, I want to say it's been in place probably for the past 10, 12 years is the MMI, the one that a lot of schools are going towards. Because in the MMI, and there's a lot of statistical information that supports this as far as this type of interview, is that it allows the interviewer and also the applicant to think on their feet, right? And so, and I'll go into more detail about what the MMI looks like, but the MMI, you have your, generally speaking, 10 stations, 9 which are the interviews, 1 which is you sit and wait. But with the MMIs, if you don't do so hot in one of the interviews, you can redeem yourself with the others, right? So if the first one you get really nervous and you don't think you did so well, you can move on to do the other interviews and still be a competitive applicant. It's not gonna, depend on just 1 or 2 interviews. So that's the beauty of the MMI. So how do you prepare? Well, definitely do your homework just like you have been as far as the application process. Keep in mind the skills and qualifications that med schools are seeking in a candidate. I refer back to the core competencies. You have that information in front of you. You just have to line up what you've done academically, personally, that indicates that you meet those core competencies. So you want to communicate those skills, right? So you don't want to just answer the question like, why do you want to be a doctor? Because I want to help people. Well, okay, fine. But what have you done that indicates that you want to help people, right? So that's where your clinical experiences come in. And so you want to go into detail and develop a narrative and talk about that experience and how that ties into your question. Don't just answer the question, what makes you different? What have you done? And so let's say, for instance, like I mentioned, you are invited to 3 different interviews. You want to know everything about that school that you're interviewing at. Look at their mission statement. Many times admissions committees or admissions offices will allow you or give you information about, hey, did any U of A students go to Michigan or to Vanderbilt? And they're more than happy because they're really trying to select a student who wants to be there. So if you're really interested in Vanderbilt or University of Michigan or College of Medicine, Tucson or Phoenix, what is their mission statement, right? So even if we look at the 2 mission statements for College of Medicine, Tucson and Phoenix, Tucson, you do see in their mission statement about working with rural communities as far as health disparities. Their mission really focuses on that. If you're applying to College of Medicine, Phoenix, if you're doing your homework, you know that if you're accepted as a medical student there, they're looking at research. Not only are you going through the medical school preparation process, but you're going to come out with a research project at the end. So know what makes you different or what makes schools different, because they will refer that back to you. And you experienced that when you filled out the secondary, right? The College of Medicine Tucson, they ask you questions about, what things do you know about their school? Every school is going to ask you that. So review your mission statement, review your secondary application, utilize your networks. If you know students who've, gone to that school and gone through the interviewing process, connect with students, contact their admissions offices. They might have a club that you're interested in, primary care physicians club. So any way you can gather information about them. But let's talk a little bit about what most schools are doing, and that's the many multiple interviews. So let's talk specifically about these. Again, previously it was all done in person, and at Tucson College of Medicine, it was at the very end before COVID hit, it was at the HSID building, which is a brand new building, high tech, really cool, 8th floor. If you've ever been up there, it's really amazing. But then COVID-19 hit. And so, hey, guess what? Everything is going to be done virtually, right? And so at the very end of last year, they started doing the virtual MMIs. So just know, the idea hopefully is that, as schools get back to normal and interviewing process is back to normal, they will probably move to in-person. But right now, everybody across the country, and we work with a lot of different colleagues across the country, are going through virtual interviews. And so I know that a lot of students that are attending today, applicants that are attending today, you might have applied for the mock MMIs that happen or are happening right now. but unfortunately weren't able to be accepted. So College of Medicine, kindly allowed us to also review some of the specifics about College of Medicine. So College of Medicine Tucson, they've been around for over 50 years. Some of the signature programs, and if you have an invite for the College of Medicine Tucson, they really want you to know about their distinction tracks, what things make them uniquely different. These are the different distinction tracks that College of Medicine Tucson has. So bottom line, no matter where you interview, what they're trying to figure out is, are you a good fit for our school? Are you really wanting to be here and not just get in, but is it that something that we offer that you would want to stay at the College of Medicine Tucson or Phoenix or any school, right? So College of Medicine Tucson wanted us to share this information with you. They also wanted to let you know, and all schools are like this, the interview process is extremely confidential. So there's no discussion, no talks between admissions committees and interviewers and things like that, that this whole process and the evaluation of these applicants for the class of 120 is confidential. So College of Medicine Tucson implemented MMIs in 2011. And I have to say, I was very fortunate to be able to interview in the beginning of the process when they implemented this. And I've been working with pre-health students for over 20 years. So we went from individual interviews. I've seen the MCAT changed, 2 different times. But the College of Medicine Tucson, in the very beginning, was one of the few schools that implemented MMIs. And so know that there's been a lot of research on MMIs and how important, and the information that is derived from these interviews is very helpful for admissions committees. So this is generally the structure. And again, we're going to go over what was it like before COVID hit when you're doing in person. They've done some modifications. Again, it's going to be virtual, but typically you have 10 stations, and then 9 of them are actually interviews, and 1 is a resting station. Typically there's 7-minute interviews. They're fast. I compare it to like speed dating. And if you could envision that you're in a room, there's 10 different rooms, there are doors in front of them, they hang like an iPad in front of it, and they're timed. So 7 minutes actually in the room, interviewing with the evaluators. And so the evaluations, there's 9 evaluators in there, and they're all different people. Again, I can't hammer it, enough. They're looking for these attributes, your self-awareness. What did you know about yourself as you go through this process of preparation? Your critical thinking, communication, ethical decision-making, your cultural competency, and then also specific attributes of the College of Medicine Tucson. So, and then note today that we're going to be doing a very small version. We're not going to go through the 7 minutes. We're going to probably time it down to about 5 minutes, but we'll go into more detail about that. But just to give you a sense of what does an MMI feel like. But basically, as an applicant, you're going through 9 different, very short interviews. And this is generally what it looks like. You have 2 minutes to prepare before each station. So you get to read what the prompt is. So why do you want to be a physician? Or tell us a time when you interacted with someone who's not like you. You get to read the scenario that they have up there. And then you have some time to kind of gather your thoughts in those 2 minutes. And then it's all automated. So the first thing they're going to tell you is, now you can enter the room. In the virtual sense, they're setting them up virtually with breakout rooms. So those that are interviewing will be led into their first room, and then they will manually maneuver you around the different virtual setting. But in person, you're standing in front of a door, you're reading the prompt, you're gathering your thoughts, and then you'll hear, you may now enter the room. And then you walk in the room, you introduce yourself, the interviewer will ask you, have you read the prompt? And if you say yes, then right after that, then you'll go right into whatever the interview setup was. And so at that point, you enter the room, you interact with them, and usually at about 6 minutes, you'll hear a 1-minute warning so that you can wrap it up. So basically in that 1 minute, you know, that's your 1 minute to summarize or add anything that you want them to know about. And then when the time is over, then you'll hear an automated verbal command saying, you may now exit the room. So you leave the room, thank you, shake your hand, you know, go out the room, and then you'll be instructed to rotate, if this is physically, rotate right or left, right? Clockwise or counterclockwise. So then you move on to your next station and it starts all over. So that's, you know, physically how it's done. Virtually, what they're doing is they're going to put you into breakout rooms. So this is repeated 9 times. And again, as I mentioned, there's a resting station. You usually have 1 evaluator per room. Well, you do. You have 1 evaluator per room. And then they have 3 different types of questions, and I'll go into detail. But again, you'll get verbal instructions of what you need to do. So typically you have your 9 scenarios. 2 are traditional questions like, why do you want to be a doctor? 5 will be discussion questions where you're interacting with the interviewer and you're talking to them and they're giving you a scenario and you have to talk to them about it. For instance, let's say the scenario that you read was, you know, 75-year-old woman living with her husband shows signs of abuse. Walk in the door, discuss this with your interviewer. So you had those 2 minutes to gather your thoughts, to interact with the interviewer, and then you walk in the door and you'll talk to them about it. So those are straight out discussion questions. And then generally speaking, you'll have 2 acting stations. And this is where College of Medicine Tucson has a core group of ambassadors called pre-MDs. We might have those pre-MDs in this workshop today too. But basically they volunteer to be actors. So you have an interviewer in there, but you're not interacting with the interviewer, you're interacting with the pre-MD or the student. And so you're interacting with them. So again, our MMIs today are going to be shorter. But here's the other thing. There are no right answers. So don't think that you can answer that question, that they're looking for something specific. Again, if you look at those core competencies, they're wanting to know your critical thinking skills. How did you come up with that answer? There are definitely some wrong answers, right? So if you said, oh yeah, I'm going to call the police, I'm going to, you know, turn them in because the elderly person shows abuse. You know, there are a lot of reasons why you might see bruising or other things, right? So there's no right answer, but there are some wrong answers. But you definitely want to answer those questions and support them as you answer those questions. So this leads us into the second part of our interviewing. So we have mock interviews that are set up for today. And basically, just let me remind you that, again, we're going to do these types of interviews. And so we have actually our pre-health advisors and our ambassadors who are going to demonstrate these mock interviews so that everybody can see. We're going to show you a traditional one-on-one. We're going to show you a panel interview. And then we're going to go into the MMI, a traditional one, an acting one, and discussion, just to give you an idea of what types of questions are on an MMI. And so just to refresh your memory. So we're going to go ahead and get set up. Please go ahead and set your view on the Zoom on speaker view, because then you'll see the 2 that are interacting, or the 3 or 4 that are interacting. And also, so this one that we're doing now is a traditional interview, 1 interviewer, 1 applicant. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they're typically 30 or 45 minutes long. We're just going to give you a very short view of like 10 minutes. And let's see, and we've never done this, so we'll see if this works. So we have them getting ready to set up, and we're going to go ahead, and I'll be the timer. So I'll give you a 1-minute warning for Lupe, and I'll let you know when it's over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So you should see everybody. Everybody should be on speaker view. Awesome. And let's go ahead and Lupe, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you may begin. So
Hello, good morning. My
walk
name
in the door.
okay. Hello, my name is Lupe Weatherwich. Nice to meet you.
Hi there, nice to meet you. My name is Bella.
How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. So I'm going to start with a series of questions. Start with an easy one, and then the next one's going to be a two-part question. But I'll go ahead and ask you. So tell me about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Bella Redpath, and I'm a senior over at the U of A, and I'm a physiology major over at the U of A. And I was going to ask, did you want to know about anything I was involved with, or?
Sure, you might be able to answer that in the following question. I'll leave it up to you to see how you want to answer it. So this next question is a two-part question.
Okay.
And the first one is, what is success in your opinion? And after 20 years as a physician, what kind of success would you hope to have achieved? Please explain this.
Okay, so the first part is, what is success in my opinion?
Yes.
Okay, so success in my opinion is, not only is it for me being able to, like, obviously achieving goals is an example of success. If you strive for something and achieve those goals, that is literally the definition of success. But for me, it is how I get to those goals. It's how driven I am, and if I put my mind to something, if not only was I able to accomplish it, but what was I able to do while I was accomplishing it? Like, was I able to actually help others? Like, how was I able to achieve my goal, if that makes any sense? But success is not only reaching your goal, but it's what you did along the way to help others and achieve that goal. And then the second part was, in 20 years being a physician, what would success be to me in 20 years? After 20 years of being a physician, obviously, like, helping people is your first thought in the sense of, like, was I able to help my patients? Was I able to, cure their illness or make them feel relief? But for me, it's more about the connection with my patients. Was I able to build a connection with them? Obviously, any physician's goal is to help relieve symptoms, help ease their pain, to diagnose, but I really hope that I'll be able to connect with my patients, learn about them individually, on a personal level. So, maybe down the road when I do retire, that I can keep in touch with them and learn about them, because I think not only will that make me a better physician for them, but I just want to connect with people in the best way possible, because I know it makes patients' experiences better, and that's who I want to be as a doctor. I don't want to just be, very forward, like, okay, this is what's wrong with you. Like, I hope that I can connect with them on such a real personal level that I can maintain a friendship with them.
Thank you. So what excites you about medicine in general?
What excites me about medicine? Oh my gosh. So that's kind of funny, because when I was little, actually, I used to watch these videos on YouTube that were Extraordinary People. That was what it was called. It was a channel on YouTube. And it basically just showed people who have these different disabilities or skin conditions or just anything like that. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the entire world, like the coolest thing. And so I had to learn more. Like, it wasn't just enough to see it, like, I wanted to know why. And so I think that's where, like, my fascination for medicine kind of bloomed. But ever since then, like, I would, like, literally when I was 8 years old, I would look into, like, why is this, like, why are there bumps appearing on this person's skin? Like, why is this happening? And, like, on a cellular level, and all these different reasons. But that was, like, the start of, like, what made me love the physiology aspect behind medicine. But also, once again, going back to this, I love the personal connections that you can have with people through medicine. I love the interactions. I love seeing people's faces, when they are injured, and I'm able to identify it and I can help them get better.
Thank you. So tell me, why should we choose you over other qualified applicants that we currently are interviewing?
Why should you choose me? So I have no doubt in my mind that all the other applicants that you're interviewing are fantastic people who have wonderful attributes. But what I think makes me stand out above everyone else in that regard is the fact that I'm not here to just become a physician, have that title, and then go off my merry way. Like, for me, I care so much about the interactions with people and how I connect with them and their experience individually. It's not about me. Like, I don't want to be a physician for personal, like, selfish reasons. Like, I want to do it for the greater good of others. I want to make a difference in society. I want to change things. I want to be the greater good in medicine. So.
And when you said you want to change things, is there a particular thing that you have in mind that you know could use some improvement in healthcare, but maybe you have better, some ideas that might make that change?
For improvement in healthcare, well, more specifically, I want to help people who maybe can't afford going to the doctor or, getting the medication they require. I want to help homeless people. So in terms of like making sure everyone gets the healthcare that they deserve, I want to help make a change in that regard. I don't want to see people who can't get their child to the doctor's office because it's too expensive or things like that. Like, I want to make sure it's universal and everyone gets the help that they need.
So are you talking about policy changes, or are you talking about your own private practice having a sliding fee scale?
Personally, I might want to have my own private practice, and in that regard, probably that. But also, if I have the ability to make policy changes, I would definitely want to look into that.
Okay. And another question, how do you envision using your medical education? You mentioned some of the things that you're passionate about. What are some of the other things that you want to do in your private practice or out in the community that will enhance access to, as you mentioned, underserved populations?
Well, I would like to I envision in a perfect world having an open clinic that people can walk into. I think that'd be amazing. And even maybe having volunteers that could go out into certain low-income communities and helping people on the spot with aid, and even like if that means directly going up to people who don't have homes and who don't have a good financial system, if that literally means having an open clinic where they can walk in and give them free medical service or go to them directly and help them. But that would be a dream come true.
And then finally, I know that you mentioned earlier, you've done a lot of things to prepare you for this path of becoming a physician. Can you tell us a little bit more in detail, what are some of those things that you've done that you feel have prepared you to go into this new profession as a physician?
So a few of the things that I feel like I've done to help prepare for that is, obviously there's the study, getting to know your facts, and the learning aspect of becoming a physician. But for me, at least in my undergraduate years, I know that it's hard. It's
1 minute.
It's definitely not an easy path at all, but I feel like I've put myself out there. I've made myself uncomfortable so I can grow. So that way I'm prepared for certain situations where I might not be in my comfort zone, but I've maintained a busy lifestyle. I've, like I said, put myself in an uncomfortable situation for growth because it's not easy to be a physician. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared for the long hours, the lack of sleep. You want to be busy. I mean, I, from the beginning, have put myself out there. I've gotten super involved. I'm working with teams constantly. So that way I have those communication skills. I have the teamwork skills and all of those different aspects that make physicians the best they can possibly be. So that way you can communicate with others. You do know how to run a business. You do know how to like talk to those patients and connect with them one-on-one. So I feel like I've done a really good job with not only getting involved and working with many different types of people and exposing myself to many different types of environments, but I feel like I've done a really, really great job with learning from these experiences so I can be the best physician that I can possibly be.
Thank you, Bella. You've answered the questions very well. I've learned a lot about who you are, what your values are, and what you have to contribute to this profession as becoming a physician.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that was wonderful. let's give a hand virtually or little hand thingies, whatever, because this is really hard. I mean, our ambassadors are doing this in cold turkey. They've not been prepped. This is, you know, true answers. And so at the end, we'll go do a little wrap up. But let's go ahead and move on. But yeah, thank you so much. And didn't the time feel like forever? And that was only 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and move on to our next scenario. Let me share the screen. There we go. Everybody can see that, right? All right. So our next panel was a panel interview. So we have 2 interviewers and 2 applicants. This one's gonna be a little longer. We're timing it about 20 minutes because we have more participants, but typically it's about 30 to 45 minutes. You'll have multiple questions to both applicants. Ethan and Renee are gonna be the interviewers. Lady and Anam are gonna be our applicants. And so let me see if I can do this correctly. Again, I will time the interview and let you know when 1 minute is about over. And let me unshare. Yeah, let me I think, so let me move down. So we are at the panel interview. Okay, so I'm going to unshare this screen. We're back to speaker view, and I'm going to time it. And so, are our participants ready?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead and start.
Great. My name is Ethan. Welcome to the interview to both of you, both Lady and Anam. Just so you know kind of how this is going to work, Renee and I are going to be each asking you questions. We're going to start with one question. I'm going to ask that question to each of you, and you'll answer. One will answer, and then another will answer, and then Renee will ask you a different question and ask it to each of you. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with Lady. Okay, and so this is the question. Describe a time where you interacted with someone who was not like you. What did you learn, and how does it apply to your chosen health profession?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, I just wanted to say good morning to you, Ethan, and good morning to you as well, Renee. I am a first-generation immigrant from the Philippines, and coming from the Philippines, and immigrating to the United States, you get to see a very different environment. I went to a high school that had a very high student refugee and student immigrant population, and I met a lot of people coming from different countries and continents around the world, and that was very surprising for me because in the Philippines, I always surrounded myself with people who looked like me, who share the same beliefs as I did, who went to the same school as I did. And seeing these people and learning about their struggles and their highlights living in the United States made me really practice the value of cultural competence. And that applies to us to, talking to them and building that connection, learning more about their culture, their identity, their ethnicity, and getting some of that commonality and that similarity and intersectionality that we have. And so through that, I was able to hear their struggles, whether that's having an accent and being conscious about that accent because that might detach you from other people instead of making connections, whether that's really being good at a certain sport, but not having the financial support to proceed with that specific plan or to succeed in that specific sport by buying certain equipment and gear, whether that's really wanting to go to college and taking all of the AP classes and honors classes, but having that imposter syndrome because you feel as if you're not qualified enough to take those classes. So I was able to find that commonality and that similarity, that intersectionality with all of those friends that I had who were also student refugees and student immigrants. And that cultural competence with them, that interaction with them will really help me in the future with my profession because that would help me to view my patients as humans, just like myself, and get that interaction with them to really learn about them better and know about what they need and get that knowledge. So for example, if they're more hesitant to get specific treatments or procedures, that's probably related to, the religion, their culture, their ethnicity, and at least you already know that background. So one thing that I learned from this experience was cultural competence. And then another thing is leadership. So an aspect of leadership in there where if I do proceed into medicine, and this is why I'm here today. I would like to help out my patients, but also not have that savior mentality. I want to be able to give them sustainable ways to help themselves in the long run. So just to summarize everything, definitely cultural competency and that aspect of sustainable ways to be able to lead my patients. So leadership in one way or another.
Are there particular groups that you're invested in serving as a physician?
Yes, I am interested in serving minority groups. I personally identify as Filipino. So right now on campus, I am part of the Filipino American Student Association on campus. And I know that a lot of Filipinos are underrepresented on campus. So we are an underrepresented population on campus. And I can definitely feel that being an underrepresented population, you're not giving a lot of services and a lot of resources, especially when it comes to healthcare and the medical field. So I'm definitely interested in serving underrepresented and minority groups.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you. It was a great answer. So we'll go ahead and move on to Anam here. So Anam, I'm going to ask you exactly the same question and then give you some time to answer. So Anam, describe a time where you interacted with someone who was different than you. Talk about what you learned and how it applies to the health profession you're planning to go into.
Okay, thank you. One time I interacted with someone that was different from me was through an organization called Z Mansion, which is a volunteer program which goes around Tucson's homeless communities, and we provide food, water, clothing, medical treatments to them as needed. So me and another guy, we were team leaders on that project, and we had to organize a whole Sunday meal plan for them through a local church. So through that, obviously we have different ways how we approach a situation, how we organize ourselves and organize the team and lead a team. And both of our opinions and just our leadership ways clash. So it was, there was a lot of like different viewpoints and a lot of people arguing, and just how we sorted that out was very difficult, especially since there's so many people, like around 60, 70 homeless people waiting for us to serve them. So it's not good to have that attitude when you're going to serve people who are in need. So that was a very difficult situation I was in. And through that, I learned that even in the profession I'm going to be in medical, I'm going to be working with a lot of different people, and it's group. When you're providing medical care, you're not the only one. You work as a group. There's nurses, there's, in dental, there's dental assistants. You're going to be working as a group. You're going to have different personalities, and you're going to have to find a way to work through everybody's different personalities and come together as a group for that one purpose, which is to serve the community and serve the person and their needs, and how to make them the better, in better health or whatever they need help with. So that's what I learned during that time. Just teamwork and how to just get over your personal differences and just work together as a team.
Can you talk a little bit more specifically about how you worked that out with the person you were interacting with? How did you come to an understanding or a compromise?
So we basically sat down, we made a list of what we wanted to provide and what we were better at. Like, I'm more vocal in the way I talk to people, whereas he is more hands-on when it comes to providing medical care. So he would go around asking people what they needed help with and organize them into different sections, whereas somebody was having, slighter problems, or somebody had more major healthcare needs, whereas I would go around and I would make like the food bags and distribute water. So we just distributed our tasks, what we were better at, and we appointed it to each person, and we appointed teams. And so through that, we got to basically provide healthcare the way we wanted to, but as well as work together to do it as well. So basically a lot of communication.
Great. And do you see yourself continuing to work with populations like you worked with at Z Mansion in your medical career?
Yeah, so again, I am a minority as well. I come from Pakistan, and I'm part of the Pakistan Student Association at the U of A. So working with the homeless community, I do have, not to say it, I can feel how they feel, because obviously they're in a much worse situation than I am. But, since I am a minority, and especially from Pakistan, there's a lot of stereotypes that evolve, especially like religious, there's a lot of homophobia, there's a lot of, especially during these time, immigrants, there's a lot of stereotypes on them. So coming from that, I know there's a lot of stereotypes in the homeless community as well. And I want to work even in the future with minorities And so the dental career I want to go into, it's not going to be I want to open a private sector, but I want to move to places that don't have access to healthcare, such as like maybe native tribes that don't necessarily have the access or availability that they need to healthcare. And I want to set up like a camp there or work there close by and just work with them specifically. So that's how I want it to reflect in my future as well.
Great answer. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Renee, and he'll ask you both another question.
All right. Well, good morning to everyone. So my question, and this time we'll start with Anam, is what do you see as the greatest challenges facing healthcare today?
So I think the greatest challenges facing healthcare today is just the access to it. And then it's not just access meaning cost, but it's access meaning availability to it, travel time, where you live. If you're even in the health to even walk up or drive there or get to the access that you need. Some places, especially like native tribes that I was talking about, they live so far away from the city, they don't even have access or, hospitals in their area. And if they come to a medical emergency, what if they only have 10 minutes to get there, yet the hospital is like 40 minutes away or 50 minutes away. So I think that's the greatest challenge. It's not only, especially for people who are part of the lower class, it's not just the cost of it, but they have to worry about how to get there because they live in such, distant populations. So I think that's the biggest challenge of healthcare today is that we tend to make medical places or hospitals in big populated cities, but we always forget about the people that don't live in the cities, that live, mostly in the countryside or far away, and how they can't necessarily afford to live in the middle of the city. And, because of cultural reasons or religious reasons, they choose to have their own communities. And how just because they choose to do that, we as providers still need to provide medical care, dental care, whatever care for them. So I think that's the greatest challenge for healthcare today is that they just don't have access to it, cost or availability in the locations that they live.
Okay. So you touched a little bit about, especially in some of the rural areas or native reservations or lands, transportation is an issue because, it can be a big areas to cover. You mentioned setting up like a clinic or something of that sort, but if that's not possible, what else do you think you as a provider would be able to do, or possibly how would you be able to help to sort of alleviate that transportation issue?
I think if I'm not able to get clinics, I think there's a lot of volunteer projects you can do because volunteer is like on your own time when, and I personally, I would take the time to go over there and help them out. You can always get some of your friends together and, fellow healthcare doctors and stuff to go over there and provide healthcare as needed. So you can become friends with those communities and have close contact with them every now and then and provide it if you're not able to. I think that's when just humanity comes into place where it's like, okay, I am a healthcare provider, but I'm also human. So just check in with them every so often, see what medical care, healthcare they need if you're not able to set up clinics. Because, as a healthcare provider, you're going to have access to transportation. You're going to, as the person who is a doctor, so you can willingly go out of your way and help them, even if you're not working or on the time clock.
Well, thank you. Now, lady, same question. What do you see as the greatest challenges facing healthcare today?
Again, thank you very much for that question. I think Anam mentioned the access to care. I would like to talk about the quality of the care that's given in the United States specifically. So you can see that as a country, compared to all the other countries around the world with almost similar economic power, we pay more for healthcare, but we receive less. So the quality is definitely a problem that we have to consider, especially if we're talking about a universal healthcare that does not cater to any American at all in both sides of the spectrum. So you have Americans who would rather want to distribute healthcare needs and resources based on one's ability to pay for them. And you have other Americans who would want to distribute those resources based on equitable reasons and purposes. And I think that with the current healthcare system, the universal healthcare system that we have right now, it does not cater to any side at all. And that's why it's not working here in the United States. Another reason why healthcare we have a big healthcare problem in the United States, is that we've set plans, we have set goals. So according to the Healthy People 2020 strategies, and one of their main goals, we have health equity, which is to provide, healthcare for all people from all different backgrounds, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity. And yet we only see health inequality nowadays. So we have to get answers to questions as to why is it that, people with high cardiovascular diseases usually are people from minority groups? Why is it that we don't have a lot of healthcare resources in communities where there are a lot of minority groups? Why is it that people in those specific communities can't get, healthy food stalls, and we have unhealthy food from corner stores? Or they can't exercise outside because there's a huge crime rate. So there's an element of health inequity in that, just from the statistics. And another thing is that we don't have the main point of not having a health inequity in the United States and not having that good healthcare quality in the United States as well. Coming from a developing country, as I said a while ago, the Philippines, you see a lot of people walking to hospitals from rural areas 4 hours just to get to the hospital to get their healthcare needs met. And yet here in the United States, you see that as well, and you would not have expected that from a country that's well developed. So there's definitely some sort of problem in there. So those are just some 3 points that I mentioned a while ago. Setting goals, but not being able to attain them through the Healthy People 2020 strategies, not having the quality of healthcare as compared to other countries. And of course, that also relates to my 3rd point, which is paying more, but receiving less, and not having the healthcare really connect with people with Americans who have different unique values. Okay.
So you mentioned, a background in public health, and so you mentioned equity, which obviously is something big going on in our country. And so how would you, as a physician or some other medical provider with a background in public health, how would you address equity more at the national level? In other words, how would you work with groups to change policy? Because some of these things have to be done at a national level. So how would you envision yourself working? Would you work with specific groups? And how would you hope to accomplish that?
I definitely have seen specific physicians who have involved themselves in politics, and I don't think that that's something that's wrong, because physicians have the right to always take care of, their patients' well-being, whether that's being an advocate for social, educational, or political reasons, to be able to change policy and make sure that you're taking care of everyone's well-being. And so I'm open to changing policy that way, being involved in office to change policy that way, and make sure that public health is being considered every time we have policy changes, or every time we talk about the overall health of the nation. Another thing that I would do is I would put myself out there. I don't want to just have one-on-one experience with my patients, but I also want to work with the community. How does it look like putting yourself out there and having that one-on-one interaction with people from underserved and underprivileged communities? And how are you able to use your privilege as someone who has that educational background and that knowledge to be able to help these specific communities without necessarily having that savior mentality, but just having that altruistic goal to create policies that would cater to the overall well-being.
All right, thank you. Thank you, lady, and thank you, Anam, for your answers. And I think we're done, Josie.
Okay, so much for 1 minute, but they would have had more time, but that's okay. So, and again, boy, so much to discuss, right? Let me go ahead. We're going to move right into MMI type interviews. Let's see if we make this smooth transition. So we just finished the panel. And for the interviewers, and I know you'll have some time, make some notes of what you observed as far as the interviews. And I'm going to ask for your feedback at the very end as we talk about some of these, the ones that we don't do discussion like right after these first 2, because we will have discussion on the MMIs right after. So let's see here. Oh. All right. So now we're going to do the mock virtual MMI interviews. Just to remind you, we're going to have the applicant read for 1 minute. Typically, you would have 2. We're going to ask you to enter the room. The actual interview will last for 5 minutes. I will give you a 4-minute warning at 4 minutes. And then after that, then you'll exit the room and then rotate to the next station. I mean, that's just overall if it were virtual. So again, these times have been shortened. And let's see, who do we have that's going to be doing this scenario? Okay, let me move to the next slide. All right, so the first one is an MMI Station 1 traditional interview. We have Lupe interviewing Sarah. And so if we can get those guys set up. And so, Sarah, we're gonna have you, again, this is a mock, so pretend you're in the front of the door. We're gonna give you 1 minute to read the question. I'm gonna pop that up. And at that time, as you start to read the question, the timer will go. All right, so are we ready for that?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. You may now enter the room.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Lupe Weatherward. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Lupe. My name's Sarah. It's very nice to meet you. I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Do you have any questions about the question? Anything that you want me to explain?
No, I do not. I'm ready to answer.
Okay, well, we're happy to hear your response.
Okay, so one experience that immediately comes to my mind is an encounter I had with a patient at the free clinic I volunteer at down by the south side of town. And I was taking the vitals of an older Hispanic woman, and it was time, and I could tell she was very nervous and had anxiety, and I was trying to calm her down to take her vitals. And then it came time to ask her a few questions about why she was there for her appointment. And she again looked very nervous, and she started telling me this story about how a couple years ago she discovered a large lump on the side of her neck, and she knew that she didn't have insurance, and she was scared to or worried about going to the doctor because she knew she didn't have insurance. So she didn't go, but she noticed it was getting bigger, so she finally went in to see a doctor about it. And they sent her away because she didn't have insurance, and they dismissed it as being a lymph node that was inflamed. So she just went home, and over the past couple of years, it started to grow, and she noticed. So she went back to the doctor. They again sent her away because she didn't have insurance, and that was that. She didn't really know what to do. And then she started experiencing symptoms that she thought were related to that. And again, she saw a doctor, told them about the symptoms and the lump. She didn't have insurance, they sent her away. She eventually was, a coworker of hers told her about this place called El Rio where she could go and get care without needing insurance. And she went there, and they discovered that the lump that she had was cancer. And it had progressed because it took so long to finally get the care that she needed. And she did have it removed, but she was there for that appointment today because she was having symptoms similar to the one she had when the lump was getting really big. So she was scared her cancer was back. And as she was telling me this, she was crying, her hands were shaking, she was visibly very upset, and she reached for my hand, and I was holding her hand when she was telling me this. And it just really made me think about how when I'm hopefully a physician, how I want to be an advocate for my patients, even the ones that do not have insurance. I will do whatever I can to refer them to other places where they can get the care that they need, such as the El Rio Clinic. And I was thinking, why didn't any of the doctors she saw refer her to this place or refer her somewhere else, or try to find somewhere where she could get the care that she needed, because she obviously needed care. And it also made me think about how possibly it wasn't just that she didn't have insurance that the doctors kind of just dismissed her like that, but maybe it also had to do with her ethnicity, with the fact that she has a lower socioeconomic status indicated by not having insurance, and that her English wasn't very good. So all those factors together, I was thinking, is maybe also why that she wasn't, that those doctors dismissed her that way. And so as a physician, I really want to be not only an advocate for my patients and for patients from underserved and underprivileged communities, but also start to myself try to address, as a physician, try to address those possible biases I mentioned, and together with, not having insurance and being from an underserved and underprivileged community, what can I do as a physician to make an impact in these people's lives? And it's made me also realize that I really want to work with these types of communities when I'm a physician, and always try to advocate for my patients.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Lupe.
You may now exit the room. All right, so basically at that point, Sarah would exit the room. Let me make sure, let's see. Sarah would then exit the room and move to the following station, and then go to her next station. So let's go ahead and this one, let's talk about it a little bit. So everybody, so basically this was a traditional question. Here was a question, right? And I'll tell you, this was only 4 minutes, right? Sometimes it feels like an eternity, because if you had to go on for another 7, think about what you would say. How would you fill the time? No doubt, some applicants don't have enough to say, so they stop talking. But realize this is your moment, right? Don't let those other additional minutes go away. They're trying to figure out, again, going back to core competencies, what's your self-awareness about who you are? How do you communicate that? What is your empathy as far as, demonstrating that? And there might be some others depending on how you explained it. But this is what we're looking at as far as a traditional question. And again, for some of the MMIs here at College of Medicine, Tucson, Phoenix, they're closed, so they have no information on you. So remember, this is your opportunity to talk about and to tie in, and you did this wonderful, Sarah, in the narrative as far as, how you answered the question, what was your personal experience? And Lupe, do you want to say a few things, because you were the interviewers, or any of the other pre-health advisors?
I want to say, I'm glad that you used a story, Sarah, and you kind of intertwined, try to bring up some of those core competencies. I think, like Josie said, that's very important to not just state what the obvious is, but kind of, and you can bring in other stories and say, this is what I learned. I think when we heard Lady earlier, and she mentioned, this is teamwork and this is what I gained. So don't be afraid to summarize. If you feel at the end, you can summarize and kind of remind us of the key points that you mentioned. That's always a good strategy to use.
And sometimes there's that time that you have that you could ask the interviewer, so what is your role at the, College of Medicine, Tucson? And that way, if you have just a few minutes, but again, don't throw away those minutes that you could use to tell them more about who you are. So here's on the flip side, if you struggled with the first question on the MMI, you've got to take a deep breath, you got to brush it off, knowing that you're moving on to another station, which starts the whole scenario all over again, right? So don't get hung up if you feel, oh my gosh, I should have said this, or I said this and I shouldn't have said that, don't beat yourself. Part of the MMI and the success for applicants is that you're able to think on your feet and know that the one interview is not going to make or break you. And usually the first one, you're shaking off nerves. That's the first thing. And I noticed that on the very first two interviews, the panel and the traditional one, in the beginning, you might feel a little nervous, but boy, after that, after the minute or two, you start to feel confidence, and then you start telling your story, and the interviewer does pay attention to that. So here we go for the next one. So this one is an MMI with an acting. So we have one ambassador who's going to act. We have Renee Lozano, who's going to be the interviewer. He does nothing but sit in the back and take notes. So he's observing your interaction. So this is where the theater in you comes out, the actor in you comes out. When you get this question, you walk in there once you've read the prompt, and after Renee says, have you read the prompt? Do you have any questions? You go right into that character. And so we have the one interviewer, we have the one actor, and the applicant. Renee's the interviewer, Yanali is the actor, and Kobe is our applicant. So are we ready for this one? Say yes.
Ready.
All right, let me see. Let me make sure I flip the right slides. Okay, so once I bring up the scenario, again, I'm the timer. I will allow you to read the prompt, and then I will tell you, you may now enter the room. So visually walk into the room, introduce yourself. And here we go. I'm gonna start the timer as soon as I show the question. You may now enter the room.
All right, good morning, Yaneli. It was nice seeing you again. Is there anything on your mind?
Hey, Kobe. Yeah, I'm just really down and sad. And I'm just like so tired right now. Like, I found out I didn't get into medical school, and I'm just so distraught. Like, this has been my dream since I was like a kid. Like, my parents really poured all their money into college and everything so I could follow my dreams. And now, like, I can't even do that. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm just so distraught, and I'm just stressed and sad.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, Yaneli. I know you worked very, very hard on this application cycle. Do you plan on continuing into medicine after this, or what do you think?
I don't even know anymore. Like, I don't think I am, because if I can't even get into med school, how are they gonna accept me again? Like, they don't want me right now. Are they even gonna want me in the future? And like, I can't even, like, I'm so like scared and anxious to tell my parents that I like literally didn't get into medical school. Like, they paid so much for me, and like my whole family, like I'm a first generation like college student, and I was supposed to like go to medical school, and now I can't do anything. And it's just, I'm just so sad and angry that I couldn't, like, I feel like I'm like, I didn't accomplish my goals, and like I'm a disappointment.
Okay, so Yaneli, again, I'm very, very sorry that happened. I guess like what I can say to you is that in life, there's always going to be wins and losses. We're going to have setbacks. We're going to have failures. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we're not going to let those affect us in our potential. Kind of like what you were saying, we got close together because we are first gen students. We do have family that have a lot of pressure on us. We want to fulfill those expectations for our families, but like you said, sometimes things just don't work out, and then we're always worried about what our families are going to think, what our friends are going to think of us, whether or not we worked hard or even if we tried. But at the end of the day, I think that we just got to learn from our mistakes, learn from our setbacks, learn from our failures. I've had plenty of opportunities that I have lost, that I have missed. And of course, it affected me deeply. I just didn't know what to do with myself. It was very hard to just go through that process, that healing process. But then it's just, I kind of told myself to just have that faith in me, just give myself, some slack, that sometimes things don't work out. And then soon enough, later on in life, it's all just gonna make sense. All your questions are gonna be answered. Sometimes how I see it is when one door closes, another one opens. There's so many opportunities that are just not made for us at that moment. Sometimes it might not, in your case, it might not be the time. Right now, COVID's going on. There's a lot of things going on in the world. At this time, a lot of people would just want to kind of rest, and I would suggest maybe taking this upcoming year to just rest. It's very overwhelming these days. And then you just went through a very stressful application cycle. But think of this as an opportunity for you to better yourself, grow as an individual, learn from this experience, being rejected, facing rejection, because in life, not everything's going to be a win. We're always going to have different opportunities that will be taken from us. And sometimes you might feel like it's unfair.
1 minute.
You might feel like it's unfair, or you feel like maybe you deserved it more than the other person, but don't think that way. We're all unique in our own way. There's always going to be different opportunities out there for you. And medicine, Yaneli, you're a smart girl. We study together. You always get better grades than me. So do not make yourself feel any worse as of right now. You got this. Just apply again next cycle. I'm here for you. Your family, I'm sure, will be here for you. Your friends, we're all here to support you. Never give up on your dreams, because dreams, there's always going to be different paths. It's never going to be a straight line to that goal. You're always going to have to go through those trials and tribulations, climb mountains to get to those dreams and to achieve those goals. So just take my advice on that. You're going to get there one day, and I'll be there with you on this journey.
You may now exit the room. All right. Wow, that's a tough one, right? So just a couple notes. It's an acting question, right? So this is what you've been told. Probably the most underlying core competency is the empathy, right? And let me let everybody know, these students have not been prepped on this question. They're coming in cold turkey, right? And so remember, as I mentioned earlier, you're practicing all these different attributes, you're thinking about this. So the actors today and the students participating have not. One thing about this question, and any question, is that one, there might be a question you don't know, and that's okay. But here's the thing, you could also integrate how resourceful you are. Don't feel that you have all the answers, right? I mean, in this scenario, probably the first thing that I would think of, and I would suggest, is have them talk to their pre-health advisor. Find out what are the reasons why they didn't get in, right? Again, you don't know this, and again, we're putting these students on the spot, is that's probably one of the things a lot of applicants don't think about is, hey, I don't need to do this alone. I can make the referral to somebody else who has the answers. But the idea is probably for this scenario is the empathy and to comfort the person that you're talking to. But the other thing too, and again, this is difficult, is that you don't want to come across lecturing. You want to hear what Yaneli had to say and probably allow her to say more, so then it's a dynamic back and forth. That would be one thing that I would suggest. How about Renee, as you were observing, anything you want to say?
Right. Yeah, I think Kobe really listened to what she had to say, and I think acknowledged some of those pressures she was feeling. She mentioned being a first-gen student, and I think he used his own experience of, hey, so am I, and so sort of I understand maybe to some capacity those pressures that you're feeling because, you know, we studied together. I'm also first gen. I have the pressures from my family. And so I think, you know, for healthcare in any profession is really, you're not always going to be the same as your patient or whoever's sitting in front of you, but you can always make sure to make them feel comfortable by saying, hey, you know what, I may be similar in one way, or, you know, I also had some pressures, and also acknowledging that, you know, failure happens, and that he himself said, you know, I've had some stuff too that's happened to me, and I've had to sort of overcome these things. So
Perfect. And again, we're going to be answering questions at the very end. So be sure to put them in the chat, or we'll be, you know, raising our hands and things. But wonderful. Thank you, Kobe. Thank you, Renee. Awesome. And
Thank
Yaneli, you were so dramatic. I love it. All right. Thank you. We're going to move on. So this is our last one of the MMI. So after this one, we'll be opening it up for Q&A, question and answers, and then also do some final reflection things, and also to give you some tips on virtual interviews. And so Lupe will be doing that. But let's go into our last mock scenario of MMI. This is a discussion question. One interviewer, one applicant. Ethan will be the interviewer, and Anam will be our student. And so as soon as I show you the question, again, I will go ahead and start the time. Let me find, there it goes. You may now read the prompt. You may now enter the room.
Hello and welcome. My name is Ethan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, I'm great. Do you have any questions about the prompt?
Is there any other underlying health conditions that I should know about the 20-year-old and over 56-year-old patient?
At this stage, no. It's just their age are the only factors that you're aware of that you need to make a decision.
Okay. So based on the question, as if I'm only looking at age, I would personally go with the 20-year-old because as you can see, if they need a respirator or a ventilator, it's more likely the chance that the person that's older than 56 has other health conditions such as Alzheimer's or other conditions that might effectively lead to death, whereas the 20-year-old has less chances of getting those health conditions. So giving him the ventilator means that he will have a higher possibility to survive and live the life that is left. But based on the question, if it was any other question, I feel like there's many other different aspects to look at it. You could also ask the consent of the patients, if so needed, because I know for a lot of religious, cultural reasons, a patient might refuse a ventilator in the first place or a respirator in the first place. So there's that. And, I think it's other reasons of the healthcare conditions. I think looking at age, I would always prefer for the younger patient to have it, just because there are other health conditions that an older person could most likely have that is life-threatening as well, whereas the 22-year-old might not have those health conditions that could potentially lead to them having a much more healthier life and more possibility of surviving. So yeah.
What if they were closer in age? What if it was a 22-year-old and a 38-year-old? Would you make the same decision?
See, based on that, I think the age factor, when it comes to me working in ICU, I feel like there's going to be other aspects that I will have to look at. So again, religious and cultural reasons for why they could either refuse or agree to the ventilator, or their families. But it will also be other healthcare conditions that they have, because just based on age, I cannot make that decision. It'd have to be looking at other health problems that they have that I need to look to make those decisions. So that would be my answer.
Okay, so the principle that you're using is whichever patient is the most likely to live and successfully recover is going to be the patient that you decide to save. Is that accurate?
Well, it won't be just based on that. Again, it'll be based on the patient's beliefs as well, what they want to do, because they are the ones who are going to be receiving the treatment. So it'd be that, as well as, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I am in that situation where I have to make that decision who will get the ventilator, and this is life and death. And if it comes to that, then, I will have to make it based on their other health problems that they have that leads to life expectancy. It's possibly not like the best answer, but as a doctor, that's at the end of the day, that is your decision to make, that who will get the treatment, even though it could be, you try not to be as biased, but at the end of the day, there are other health problems that can lead to someone passing away, unfortunately. And so if somebody has that problem, which eventually would lead them to passing away within a couple of years, then, you'd prefer to give it to someone who has a higher life expectancy.
So let's fill in the gaps a little bit and see if it affects your decision at all. So let's imagine we're back to the 56-year-old and the 22-year-old. Let's imagine the 56-year-old is a sitting state senator, and the 22-year-old, he's a local. He works at a local bar. Both are in very good health. Would that affect your decision?
No, I don't think what they do in their personal lives has a decision. I think when it comes to family, maybe that could be a decision if they have kids to take care of. But at the end of the day, what they do in their personal life, or what their beliefs are, who they are as a person, is not a decision factor that I would take under consideration when it comes to life and death. For life and death, it's just what they're dealing with for their health problems. What they do, as a career, what they believe in, who they are as a person, has absolutely no, I won't take any of that into consideration, because they're just a human in need in front of me. So it's just the health problems there.
So just to confirm, the state senator dies and the 22-year-old lives. Is that what you're saying here?
Yes.
What if the 22-year-old, the 56-year-old was in good health, is a state senator, the 22-year-old, you find out is a recovering addict, has several other underlying health conditions. Would that affect your decision?
Well, it will. As I said before, the key aspects that I would look at is, other health problems that they do have about, which would affect their life expectancy. So if the 22-year-old, it does have a higher risk of, unfortunately leading to death in general, then it would be that I would give it to the 56-year-old, just because they are in better health than
you may now exit the room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So let's, that one, it's always the discussion one generally is one that we end up talking a lot about. But so here it is, there's that scenario and some of the attributes, the core competencies. So Ethan, you want to share a little bit about what you were feeling as you were going through this interview?
Yeah, no, I think Anam did a great job, with these ethical decision-making questions. There's generally no right answer.
Sorry.
And right, there's no easy answer, there's no right answer. And so what Anam did in kind of creating a principle, she's like, here's the principle I'm operating under. I'm going to save the person who has the best chance of living. or living for an extended period of time. And she stuck with that principle throughout. And so, often interviewers will try to badger you and change the scenario, try to make you change your mind, try to make you shift your principles. And Anam did a really good job of sticking with the initial principle, her initial idea throughout. And so she was really consistent, stuck to it. Obviously, there's no right answer to this one. It's a really difficult decision. But I think she did great on that. Obviously, they're looking at communication skills, empathy skills, decision-making skills, like it says on the screen. And certainly, ethical decision-making skills, the ability to, rely on, values and principles that may be semi-universal, but they're looking at the way you think through, the way they think through the answer to those questions.
Very well spoken, because that's exactly, again, thinking about, what, philosophies, what values do you have? How do you back up your answer? If someone comes in and is kind of wishy-washy and trying to tell the interviewer what they might want to hear, again, they want to know, how do you back up your answers? What's your rationale? Again, there's no right answer, but what they want to know is, how do you apply this and how do you make your decisions? So, wow, I hope you guys enjoyed this so far. So the next pieces are really to talk about, and Lupe will be doing this. We're going to talk about, this whole virtual environment and interviews. Again, some of this might sound like it's, common sense, but Lupe, if you will go over the tips for virtual multiple interviews, and actually any virtual piece, but this did come from the College of Medicine, Tucson. So we do have a handout for this.
Sure. So one of the things you want to make sure is that you want to test your computer. You want to make sure that you have a strong internet connection. That could be that maybe you have your phone handy. So if you need to use your internet from your phone, you can switch. Or if you need to make a phone call, you have that available. You also want to turn off any functions from your laptop or your personal computer or phone that may be making noises while you're doing your interview. You also want to make sure that the background is neat, that there's no wardrobe or anything that's going to look unprofessional. Make sure that there's nothing that's going to distract people from listening to you. Rather, that you don't want them to look at your background if it's not neatly maintained. You also want to avoid backgrounds with windows and bright lights. You want to test your lighting to make sure that there's not too much bright or too darkness. If you need to put a light in front of you to illuminate your face, you could easily do that. You want to also choose a quiet location. Maybe make sure that you let people around you know that you're going to be doing an interview so that it's quiet. I know it's harder to do if you live with a large family in a small area, so that might be challenging, but you might need to think of something creative. And then finally is, as I mentioned earlier, silence any notifications. During your interview, you don't want to be distracted by that. Make sure that your clothes looks professional. Looking at the camera also, that's something that it's tricky for me because I tend to want to look at the screen. Because when you're looking at the screen, the people are going to see your eyes moving in a different direction. So make sure you look at the camera, smile. Sometimes it helps kind of settle your nerves maybe sometimes. Not excessively, of course, but just to kind of help you calm down. Wear the same formal attire that you're going to wear for your in-person interview. That speaks, a lot for your character. You only have one chance to make a good impression. So make sure that your hair is done. Make sure that if you're a woman and going to wear makeup, that it's not excessive. Make sure you test to see what the lipstick is going to look like on the screen. And for men, make sure that your hair looks nice. And then finally, videotape yourself speaking if you can. We all have our phones. I know that we've all done some videotaping. So videotape yourself, maybe even ask yourself some other questions, pretend you're answering some other questions. So you can see any nuances that you might make. Maybe sometimes you do too many times. Maybe you have a case where you get a little, maybe stutter a little. It's gonna help you kind of see how your voice, also practice your speaking with your voice. Try not to keep that monotone voice because you're gonna lose the other people on the other side. If you're excited about something, let that be known in your voice. It's important because then they'll also be able to reflect that and see that, well, this person is really excited about medicine and they have a lot of great ideas. So that's some basic stuff to keep in mind, is try to fluctuate your voice. Think about what you want to emulate of those great instructors when you're talking also and doing your interview. And then the other one is, as I mentioned, look at the camera. Try to do things before you start that help you relax. You know, take a deep breath. Remember, this is about you, so you should know how to talk about yourself. You don't have to, there's nothing that you have to talk about something that you don't know about, right? You should know yourself well enough to be able to talk about yourself in a way that is not conceited. It is not a way that's going to show professionalism. So just relax. Try to find things that help you relax. If it's something that makes you, reminds you a smell before you start, deep breaths, some meditation before you start, some stretching, just some basic skills. But anyways, that's a lot of information. I know we talked about a lot of stuff today. We'll be sending you the slides, and thank you so much for being here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lupe. All right. So thank you to our pre-health ambassadors. And then also the College of Medicine did provide their information if you wanted to contact them. And so at this point, we're going to go ahead and I'll unshare this screen, but now we're going to go ahead and take questions and we'll look at the chat. And hopefully we have covered everything that you need as far as preparation. This was a really long workshop, but for those that are applying, I think it's going to provide you some really good foundation information. If you need to make an appointment with one of the pre-health advisors to talk about your situation in more depth, feel free to do that. Other than that, let's go ahead and open up for Q&A. And I'm going to let the pre-health ambassadors and also, well, actually the pre-health advisors, and I'll chime in when I need to answer your questions. So
just, I think there was somebody, Nandi, I think, raised her hand, so she might have a question.
okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
I
Go ahead and
have
unmute yourself.
I think I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I actually have two questions. My first question is, can we repeat scenarios that we've described in our secondaries if it's an open interview? Or should we, because with the extensive amount of secondaries that have come through, I've dug a lot in my life and I've reflected upon those. So would it be badly to use a very similar response for a similar question?
Anybody want to chime in on this one? Well, let me go ahead and chime in then. So let me get your question correctly. Utilize, it's an open interview, so they have your AMCAS, they have your MCAT scores and all that. And using the same scenario for your answer as your interview?
So, for example, in a secondary, if they asked, explain one of the points in your life where you decided to go into medicine as a physician. And if I use the same response that I wrote out for the secondary, that, oh, I chose to go into medicine after patient interaction with this particular patient, but I'd already written that out in my secondary.
Yeah. My impulse, and again, remember, you don't know who's interviewing you, so they're all coming to the table with you with different experiences. My initial reaction to that question would be, don't repeat what you already have on your application. This is your time to tell me a little bit more. You might expand it, you might shorten and use it as an intro, and then on top of that, indicate another experience if you can. I would say, I want to know more about you when you walk in that door. Even with an open interview, they might ask a question because they flipped through it and they did pick it out as their question. But I would say one of the things, and maybe this applies or not, but one of the things I heard from applicants who didn't get in last year, they kept using the same scenario. Don't do that. Utilize other scenarios, right? Because again, they want to know you as a person. They want to get to know you a little further than your application. Either explain that and go into more detail. use it as an intro to talk about something else, right? Because I mean, the primary application limits you on what you can answer, meaningful experiences, but chances are those meaningful experience, you could go into more detail. Does everybody agree, or any of the advisors have additional suggestions?
I mean, I think, right, your answer for why you want to be a doctor isn't going to change and shouldn't change. So that's going to stay the same, but it may be useful to pull in a different experience, or if you're talking about the same experience, make sure you're talking about it in a slightly different way. Right, there's something you can show about your excitement and passion about it that you can't in a piece of writing as well. And so if you are, I mean, I do agree with Josie that if you can, shrink the one that you talked about in your primary application and see if you can give another example that helps you illustrate that same idea. But some of it's going to stay the same. That I mean, you're not going to change. And they're looking for consistency, right? They want you to know what your application says, and they want to make sure that those core principles, those core ideas are the same, that you know what it says in your application.
Makes sense. So I think perfect. I will try to balance out staying true to my initial narrative and then adding more information so it builds my application further. And then
it's
my
closed,
second,
you won't have to worry about it.
and then I can say whatever makes sense. So quickly going back to the point you made, if it's closed and they don't have my application, and you mentioned that the interviewers that sometimes are different from the admissions committee, would they tell the admissions committee what I answered, or would it just be scored?
Yeah, basically they have like a rating sheet, they rate you, and then they also have comments. And again, they're looking for those attributes and how you match up with those, and are you a good fit for their institution. So their notes go to the admissions committee. And so then at that point, they make a decision whether or not you're offered, on a wait list, rejected. But again, you got the interview, right? So feel really good about that. This is your time to shine. So absolutely, you've been weeded out through 10,000 applications. So, and here's the other thing. I want you guys to remember, being a reapplicant is not a bad thing. I've seen too many students, wonderful students, great applicants, and they've never been told no, and they've never failed, and then they get rejected from a medical school or a health profession program, and they give up. Do not give up. At least be a reapplicant. You could be the best applicant possible. I talked to someone recently. They haven't submitted their primary. People have been submitting since June. It might be you're a great applicant, but you applied late. It might be you're a great applicant, but the clinical experience wasn't enough. There's a lot of reasons, so don't let that discourage you. And that's what we're here for. Come make an appointment with us. If you don't get in, let's assess what was your weakness. Maybe there was nothing you could have done. You were a great applicant, but it's just the sheer numbers, right? So don't let that discourage you.
So before we go to the next raised hand, let's look at a question from the chat. And someone did ask, can we wear a mask during interviews?
I would say probably the school will instruct you whether or not you should wear one or not. I think and it would be a good question if you weren't given that option and you want to ask that interview school, what is the policy and is it okay? I would say really at this point, because it's such an unusual situation.
Right, if it's in person, they will probably,
go ahead,
if it's in person, they'll probably have some guidelines for you. I would say when you go to the store or anywhere now, I know that I always throw a mask in my pocket just because I never know who I'm going to interact with or if I'll need it. So I would say something like that. Ethan?
But I would say if it's virtual, I would probably try not to if you can. If you're in a public space where you have to wear a mask, you might want to communicate with the school beforehand and explain the situation. So it's explain it. But if you can find a space where you don't have to wear a mask, I think they're going to get more out of the interview. There's so much that happens with your facial expressions that I do think if you can find a way not to be wearing a mask during that virtual interview experience, that's probably a better idea. But schools will work with you and they'll understand.
Like the main thing we've said, communication is important. So communicate with your interviewee and the school and go from there. Now let's go to Alexis, who had their hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself, Alexis, and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you for this workshop. This is the first interviewing workshop I've ever attended, so this is very informational for me. I have two questions, and I'll try to make them brief. My first one is, so I'm a psychology major, and I'm interested in being a researcher or a therapist in the future. I'm still trying to figure out my my scope of practice, so to say. And I'm curious in terms of how much, like, how do we know exactly how much experience is enough? Is that something that they will say on the application? Is there another set of criteria that we should just automatically be mindful of?
So probably at this point, if you were invited for an interview, you made that threshold, right? Because they look to see if you have enough clinical experience. So if you were invited already, then I think you've already made that threshold, and that's as far as, you know, the clinical experience. If you haven't, and you're in the beginning of the process, a lot of times health profession schools, one, it comes out in a letter of recommendation and who supports you to say, this person will be a great colleague in my profession. The other is when you write that personal statement and the application, does that come across, and do you come across passionate about the career and profession? And then ultimately in the interview, does that come across as passionately? So it depends.
Okay, thank you so much. And then my second question is, so I'll ask and then I'll explain what I've observed from this workshop is what makes the strongest examples for experience questions. So like there was a question in terms of like, explain a time where you have not gotten along with someone. For me, I'm curious about this because I've been in a lot of teamwork situations, but the one that stands out to me is personal. And I'd love some advice on this, but it's my relationship with my mom, because it's, and I don't know if that's something that, of course, keeping it superficial and professional is priority, but because it has impacted my life in so many ways, and I feel like it would be an excellent example of how I've shown my own resilience and self-awareness and critical thinking. I would like to use that as an example, but would that match the criteria for something that is strong?
Does anybody want to answer that? Because again, I have my ideas, but do you want me to answer it? Okay, here goes.
Sure.
So anytime you're in an interview, the thing is, if you're talking about something either that is sensitive or where it might, in this scenario, and I'm guessing you said it was your mom, your family, and teamwork and that kind of thing. You know, is that the best case scenario that you want to share? Do you want to throw up a red flag because you may not have time to answer it completely? And ultimately what you're doing as an undergrad is really demonstrating how you're preparing yourself and what experiences do you have that will make you successful in your profession, right? If that is the best experience, and let's say it is with your mom, you want to make sure that they leave going away knowing that you've resolved that issue, or how have you, demonstrated going forward, what skills, what information, what things have you learned that will apply to the future. I always stay away from family. Again, no, you don't know who's interviewing you. And they might say, hey, this is the best case scenario. I'm not sure, right? I would say I would default to something non-family. It's just like letters of rec. Don't get them from family. You should know that. But that's what I would say. If you know that that's a scenario you're going to use, make sure that interviewer leaves with, hey, this student demonstrated exactly what would happen given the scenario, and it answers all my questions. Okay. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think Josie has a good point there. If it's too raw and it's going to make you break out into tears during the interview, you want to make sure they're also testing your maturity. How mature are you? So I would echo what Josie said, is try to pick some scenarios. You have time to prepare for these interviews. Have a few things in your pocket and try to highlight all 15 core competencies. So that's what I would do if I were you, to prepare with those scenarios. And then what are the core competencies you're trying to demonstrate?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So another question from chat says, for a traditional interview where your questions are not timed, about how long should you prepare to talk per question?
Well, if it's like a traditional interview, it's not an MMI, they might give you a half an hour, but it probably isn't just one question. It's probably a whole series of questions like Lupe was demonstrating, because at half hour, they're trying to get at different characteristics and attributes. So it could be even like for a dental school applicant, I had one dental school applicant indicate that they talked about modeling, but he was looking for, what are your fine motor skills, right? What are your hobbies? What are you passionate about? So it could be a variety of questions. It might not even be health related. Chances are it is, but a lot of times they want to get to know you. You've already made, hey, we can train you. You're smart enough to go through professional school. Now we want to get to know you as a person. So sometimes it's just, and they're usually on those traditional interviews given a goal to meet as far as what you need to find out about that applicant. So they might be say, find out about this person dealing with people who are not like them, or find out what their hobbies are. So it really depends. I think talking to other applicants who have applied to that school is very helpful because they can give you an insight.
All right, and so this next question is also about masks. So we'll read it, and so let me read it, and then we'll answer it quickly. Do you think there will be many cases where the interviewers will be wearing masks? Are more schools trying to have interviews not be in the same room as one another? If it's 2 for 1, I'm not sure what that means. I read lips as a backup when I can't hear super well.
Well, I think nationally what we're hearing is everybody's going virtual. There's no way they're bringing people on campus. So if that's an exception, the school will tell you, and then I would follow their instruction. Otherwise, everybody that we've talked to nationally are going virtual.
Right. And again, I think like we said before, if there is a circumstance whether you can't hear well or whatever the case may be, whatever circumstance is unique to you, I would say make sure communication, right? Communicate with the school before you do that interview so that they can be aware of it. And that's not something that you're worrying whether, because like Lupe said, you don't want to be nervous about something, right? So communication is key. So I'm gonna go, Nandini, hold off just a second. I wanna make sure, since we answered a question for you already, I wanna make sure we get to another person, then we'll come back to you. So Angelica Garcia?
Yeah, I was wondering, what would you say like the 3 most common mistakes interviewees make?
Oh, well, I know one for sure. And, because we're so close to the College of Medicine Tucson, is that a lot of students are involved in their programs and things. Don't be too familiar. If you know the interviewer and you had them in physio, Dr. Cohen is interviewing you, sometimes a student will get too familiar and too laid back. Take that interview like you've never met that person before. That's probably one of the things, if we're talking about MMI, probably not utilizing the time efficiently because this is a time for you to talk and you might shorten your time. Probably the third one, I can't think of the top 3, but those 2 come to mind quite a bit. Answer the question. Yeah, that's one. Because I know that I've been like interviewing and it's like they're reading the prompt, or it's a regular interview or a traditional interview, and they don't answer the question, or they don't say they want to be a physician, or they don't come out and say, they keep using like healthcare and general terms. You need to tell them, spoon feed them what you want and what you want them to know. So those are probably the top 3 that I've seen in my years of interviewing.
I would say also know the mission of the school. I think that's a lot of mistakes. Sometimes students don't really read up on the school, and a question comes up and they have no idea, or they confuse that school with another school. Make sure you know who you're applying for and what they stand for.
And I think the last thing I'll say is for interviews is don't assume that the person knows about you in any way, right? Just because, again, just because you said you did this, that doesn't mean that they're gonna assume, like they shouldn't assume that you speak another language. It's something that I I've seen a lot where they will talk about different things, but students never elaborate that, hey, I speak this language and this is how I've used it. So we're gonna go with Nandini, and that will be the last question. If you have additional questions, I would say make an appointment with us. Go to prehealth.arizona.edu. You'll find the link, I believe it's at the top, where you can say make an appointment, and we can answer your questions then. We have open appointments for next week already. And so, all right, last question.
Well, thank you for coming back to me. My last question is, so for the ethical question that was brought up close to the end, can you bring up a personal experience? I know the pre-health ambassador chose not to in that case, but would it be appropriate?
Absolutely. I think if you can anytime bring in your personal experience or relate it to something that you've gone through, absolutely, because I think it strengthens the scenario. It's not just a hypothetical, but that you've actually done that. And that's why, like dealing with someone who's not like you, when you talk about a personal experience, it just reinforces that. I mean, this is just like your personal statement. This is your time to talk about all the cool things that you've done. So I would say, yes, I can't think of a scenario where I wouldn't.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's
Thank
always
you.
good.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's always good. Yeah. And the other thing I would say, make sure if it is personal, don't go too negative. I had a student who said, they described it was something to do with their parent and how bottom line was they did not like they had a doctor, they loved that doctor, they got a new doctor, parent didn't like that doctor, but the student in the mock interview was really negative about it. And remember, you don't know who's interviewing you. A lot of times they may not say, I'm Dr. So-and-so. They might just say, hey, I'm Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, right? So you never know. And you don't want to put that part of, I having worked in health departments and having to give advice to doctors, I've gotten doctors tell me, and when did you go to medical school, right? And so you don't want that sort of negative part to play a role in your interview. So instead of being negative, just say, you know what? My parent didn't thrive as well with the second provider. Maybe they didn't connect as well as they did with the first one. So again, making sure you're not too negative, because that can be, again, that might not look well for you. So
yeah, don't raise any red flags if you don't need to. I mean, that's really important. So I know that we're over time, but I want to thank everybody for attending and all our participants who did the mock. And in fact, I'm going to ask the pre-health advisors and our ambassadors to hang out after this. But thank you so much for attending. Make an appointment, come talk to us. We'd love to hear what your journey looks like and if there's anything we can do to help you. We have workshops that are coming up. And so as I mentioned, MCAT workshop, personal statement workshop, we will have them on our website, and also if you like us on Facebook. So go to prehealth.arizona.edu and like us on Facebook, and you'll get all of our information. Any last words from the panel or from the panel?
I was just going to share this. Hopefully you can see that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's our pre-health blast. I forgot to put it in the PowerPoint.
That's okay.
But this is our pre-health blast. This is only the save the date. So I just want to make sure that you are all aware of it. It will be on November 21st. It will be virtual. And so we're going to discuss some of these areas that you see there, admissions process, getting to know faculty, and more importantly, getting to know faculty for those letters of recommendation. We'll talk about clinical and volunteer opportunities. I think that's a big question right now because of COVID-19. So what do you do? So we'll talk about that. We'll have a health professions student panel as well. So students who are in their current, health profession school and how they're doing. So I will say, go to prehealth.arizona.edu, look under our special events or signature events area. And that's where you'll find the RSVP. Usually the RSVP, we put it out about a month before the actual date. So you might see this somewhere soon. But again, save the date, mark your calendar. It'll start at 9 a.m. and probably go around till noon or so. Just as an FYI, noon to 1, I would say, is when we'll end it. So again, November 21st at 9 a.m. our 8th annual pre-health information blast.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a wonderful day. And those that got interviews, good luck. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help you, and you should be thrilled about getting those interviews. Thank you.
Yes.